So, Katie, what if you never found yourself dragged into an uncomfortable argument about the sequel trilogies again?
My quality of life would be better.
Yeah. Yeah. My life would be way easier if I did not have to talk about the sequel movies.
Based upon where we know each other, we go through that conversation with like a lot of people, and it's like
I'll tell you what, when I was on my way to record this, the guy who owns the bar with me was asking me like, what do you do when people ask you about the sequel trilogies? And I always go, there's so much Star Wars to talk about. Let's talk about something else.
that's a great response.
Or what if you never had to pick between cosplaying or Boba Fett or a Sith?
I would feel empty inside.
Do you dress up?
I am. I do. But I tend to go more like Luke Skywalker. I feel like Luke Skywalker is the person we all are. Han Solo is the older brother we all wish we were.
Mm-hmm. Oh, really? Luke Skywalker? I hate Luke Skywalker.
I see. Everybody says that, but guess what? If you like Star Wars, you are Luke Skywalker. You are not Han Solo.
Well, no, I'm not Han Solo. When I was a kid, I liked Luke, obviously, but now I just look back, I'm just like, he was so whiny. He's such a whiny little kid. I guess probably we all were at that point.
It's you looking in the mirror at age 17 and going, I'm not comfortable with that person anymore. I've grown so much.
Oh, that's a great way to frame it. I always said I didn't like Luke when I was younger because I was like, Han Solo is like literally Han Solo and Indiana Jones are my number one favorite person in the world. But when I learned about the hero's journey is when I really like truly appreciated Luke, and Star Wars was like a whole new thing at the ripe old age of like 35. I relearned Star Wars all over again.
I mean, the one thing I will say about Luke is that at least he has an arc, which we can't say about some of the later characters. So I'll give him that. He has an arc.
Oh, no. We're already breaking my first rule, which we haven't even gone over yet.
Okay, sorry about that. All right. Hello, and welcome to the What If Pop podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Koji.
And I'm your other host, Katie.
This is where we dive headfirst into the intriguing and imaginative world of pop culture's most fascinating what-if scenarios.
Today, we have guest J.C. Reifenberg.
J.C. Reifenberg was born in the world of John Hughes. Quite literally, he grew up in Shermer. Is that how you say it?
Shermer, Illinois.
Known as the real Northbrook. In high school, he fostered a lifelong interest in filmmaking and began making short films that would air on the local cable access station. After attending film school at the University of Miami, he moved to New York City and worked for Major League Baseball for several years before moving to LA to chase the dream of making movies. I'm going to have to talk to you about that. Along the way, he performed Star Wars trivia on The Rosie O'Donnell Show in 1999 and MTV's TRL in 2004, in which he won a trip to Skywalker Ranch to see Star Wars Episode 3 at the Stag Theater. By chance, after the screening, he bumped into George Lucas on his way out and was granted a hug by the maker. Wow. In LA, he began working with filmmaker Kevin Smith, producing and editing podcasts, film, and TV shows. In 2017, JC and his wife, Jen, opened Scum and Villainy Cantina in Hollywood as a place for geeks to gather and share their passions for all things nerdy 7 days a week. In this episode, we're asking the question, what if Star Wars never existed? But before we get that, let's get to know you a little bit. What Major League Baseball team did you work for?
I worked for the league website.
Oh, okay.
So I started off doing like editing the game night highlights in 2004. So anytime somebody hit a home run and you're like, oh, like you would go to the website and you'd like click on the home run. I was the one who like cut that video and put the bug on it and uploaded it to the website. The next year I managed all the team of editors. And then the following year I started going on location and shooting and editing video features. So like that was around Hurricane Katrina. I went down to New Orleans when the Major League Baseball Players Association donated a bunch of money to help rebuild New Orleans. I went to the Kansas City to the Negro League Hall of Fame and did a featurette there with Alexander Knox from Batman, Robert Wool, and just kind of traveled around and did a lot of fun stuff with Major League Baseball.
Are you a baseball fan?
I love baseball.
Oh, nice.
Koji hates the Dodgers.
No, I love the Dodgers. My son's a baseball player. All we do is baseball. He's a travel player.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I grew up playing. I mean, and again, we're about to get into what if Star Wars never existed, but this is my path. That's my path if Star Wars never existed. I
baseball?
think. Yeah, sports, baseball. I probably would be deep in baseball.
What as a player or in in kind of doing the videos.
I mean, in my dreams, I was a player. I'm not quite sure if I was ever good enough to make it, or most definitely wasn't disciplined enough to make it. But I think I probably would have pursued a career in some sort of like video end of sports. At one point, when was it? 2009. When did the Dodgers go to the playoffs with when Nomar was on the team and Jeff Kent?
I think that was around 2009.
It was like 2009. I worked for the Dodgers and did a bunch of the scoreboard videos that would play in between innings. So like I probably would have ended up in that space.
That's cool. What's your favorite team?
That's a tough question. You know how they say like don't meet your heroes?
Yeah.
Like don't work in something you love. You see behind the curtain. What I learned about baseball, without going too deep because we're talking about Star Wars, but that baseball teams are corporations.
Yes, 100%.
So when people are like, what team do you root for? I was like, well, do you root for Walmart, Sears, Target? What corporation do you root for?
Yeah. When's the first time you saw Star Wars? Moving to Star Wars?
Any Star Wars or the first Star Wars?
The first one you watched.
First movie I saw ever in the movie theater was Return of the Jedi. It was probably at the end of its first theatrical run. So my guess is it was probably like early in January of 1984. I was probably like around 3 years old. And I don't really remember anything about the movie, but I remember going to the movie and the excitement about it. And like, I remember the emotions I felt sitting in the movie theater with my dad and my cousins watching this insane thing on screen. And then that following Christmas, I have a VHS tape of it. Christmas of 1984, I got the C-3PO carrying case full of Star Wars action figures and the Ewok Village. And I gave my dad the Max Rebo Band figures for Christmas that year. I was like, this is what Dad wants for Christmas so bad. So yeah, I was hooked at Return of the Jedi, which also like makes sense that I'm a Luke guy.
Gosh, you just made me feel like so
Young?
Like in a mature way, just like nostalgically looking back, like what was the first time I saw Star Wars? What was the first toy I got or something? This is not even on the record right now. I was just explaining how you just took me back. Do you want to talk more about?
What was the first toy you got?
That's what I was going to say.
I'm curious.
So I don't know exactly the first toy I got, but I can tell you a story around the first grouping of toys I got. So I love action figures. And so I had a lot of I believe at the time they were still Kenner.
Like
Han, Luke,
95,
Leia, Chewie.
like the 1995 Power of the Force 2 figures,
So
like the ones that look beefy, or like the old
where Leia looks
stuff.
like a man.
Oh yeah, those are the 95 ones.
So
yeah.
I first saw Star Wars when I was in second grade, which I believe is probably like 91, 92. But I loved
those
them
of us
so much.
older than you call those the dark times when there was no Star Wars.
Yeah,
the
I was
dark
alone.
times.
I was alone playing with my Star Wars action figures, but I was also like, a girl. And so I'd play gymnastics with my Star Wars action figures. And Princess Leia's both her arms fell off, and I buried her in the backyard. I recovered her, don't worry. But I believe my first Star Wars toys were those Kenner, whatever generation they were. Kenner, Han, Luke, Leia, Darth Vader, Obi-Wan, the lightsaber falling off and you try not to lose it, Chewbacca, R2, and 3PO. I still have those. I have so many. I'm a collector. I'm definitely a collector of toys.
Oh, we talked about with kids, the key for if you have a little boy or a little child is that you can't start with 4 because the kids they find it boring and the special effects aren't up to it. So you have to start like with number 1 because it's about a little kid and then they relate to it, even though and then by the time they get to 4, they're into it. And so then they can sit and watch it because I started with 4 because I was like, dude, we got to start with the best one. And then he's like 5 minutes into it, he's like, dude, this is boring.
So can I tell you a crazy story?
Yeah.
We, at Scum and Villainy, we have a partnership with the Hollywood Bowl. And so we got box seats to see Return of the Jedi with a live concert. And I was like, well, I have to go. And in years past, pre-pandemic, I had seen Star Wars and Empire there. I was like, I've got to complete the trilogy. And so we had 4 tickets. And I was like, we couldn't get a babysitter. And I was like, what are we going to do? I was like, well, let's just bring Jocelyn to the movie. Let's just do it. She's like,
How old's your daughter again?
She
or at the time?
At the time, she was 2.5. We were like, let's just bring her. And it rained that night. And we sat there, and she sat there the entire time watching Return of the Jedi. She was the same age as I was when I saw Return of the Jedi. She sat there in the rain next to my friend Elliot. And because like the box seats at the bowl, there's like 2 seats, and then it like goes up and there's 2 seats. And she wanted to sit by herself. She wanted to sit next to Elliot. And the whole time she's like, who's that guy? Oh, that's Chew. Like she knows Chewbacca and stuff. She's like, oh, look. What's happening to Chewie? Oh, who's that guy? Jabba? Ho, ho, ho. Jabba? Ho, ho, ho. Like she was so into it. So that was really special that her first like movie experience that wasn't in our house was Return of the Jedi at the same age I was.
Well, I think Return of the Jedi has more stuff happening too.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's definitely action.
Yeah, because that's a level more. Plus, I think girls are just so much more mature at that age. I mean, boys are monkeys at 2.5.
Yes.
They could barely like sit and like talk. They're like grunting at each other.
They're like, give me a lightsaber.
No, boys don't even like speak in full sentences. Girls are like super smart already. They're very mature. They know exactly what they want. And like the boys are like grunting and monkeys. So it's pretty funny. I didn't realize it.
I want videos of all of this. I wish I could have seen videos of Jocelyn.
The joke with my wife was always that, how did guys take over the world? Like these girls are like just so much are so much more mature and smarter and just better people.
Yes, 100%. Yes, that's
well, we
very
don't need
true.
to get into the paradox of tolerance right now. But
should we get started?
Let's talk some Star Wars facts. Number 1. George Lucas initially had a hard time selling the idea for Star Wars until Alan Ladd at 20th Century Fox decided to produce the screenplay partially based on his love for American graffiti.
Interesting. I didn't know that. Did you?
I did know that.
Oh, okay.
I just wanted to look it up and make sure I got the facts right. And I'm sitting here with JC right next to me, so I made sure and I got my facts right.
Do you guys like American Graffiti? That's another one of my favorite movies.
Yeah.
It's a classic movie for sure. Christopher Walken was the first choice to play Han Solo. That would have been a terrible decision.
I don't even know what to say. Like,
I mean, it's hard to see it now. Maybe if he played it from the beginning.
When he was younger.
And then you could be like, all right, I get it. But it's such an iconic role for him.
Now, this I can see, but I don't want it any other way. Jodie Foster was originally cast to play Leia. During a January 17th appearance on The Tonight Show, Foster said she was offered the iconic role when she was younger, but she turned it down to star in a Disney movie.
Do you know something else about that? When they were casting Star Wars, Brian De Palma was casting Carrie. So the casting director of Star Wars was seeing everybody in Hollywood in that age group. And initially, Carrie Fisher was supposed to be in De Palma's Carrie, but she didn't want to do the nude scenes. So Sissy Spacek ended up in Carrie, and Carrie Fisher ended up in A New Hope.
It worked out.
Carrie's probably one of my favorite movies.
Oh my God, I saw Carrie for the first time recently.
The new one or the original?
The original one. I'm not going to get into it. Very upsetting.
Why?
Very upsetting.
Just the bullying? It was
bullying.
It was a different time.
The religious abuse.
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot. I mean, bullying was a pretty common thing back in the day. I mean, I was telling my son that, like, back then, you know, if someone called you gay, it was like fight. There's like going to be a fight. And like, I couldn't even imagine like back then I was like trying to explain to him, like, I couldn't even imagine a transgender person because even like the hint of somebody being gay was like, you're going to get your ass kicked. Not me personally, but it's just, like, that's just what was happening.
Culture.
Yeah. And like, it was so crazy.
True to its time.
Yeah.
I'm not,
100%,
I'm saying it was a good representation of like what it was like back then, but it was scary in a different way than I expected it to be. I expected to be scared by all the blood and stuff.
So one reason Star Wars is thought to have been such a success is because of timing. It was a story of good and evil and hope following the Vietnam War and the Watergate scandal, and a dark period for film history with such hits as Chinatown, Taxi Driver, and The Godfather Part 2. Is that really the case?
Yes.
That's what they teach you in film school. That's what I learned. Yeah.
I already knew all these things when I wrote them down, but I fact checked them.
I don't believe anything they told me at film school, though. Everything they told me, I'm like, you know,
that is also true. That is also true.
Even as a professor in the film schools, a lot of times I talk trash about the other professors. I hope I don't get in trouble for this, but because I'm just like, these guys don't know what they're talking about. They're just they're saying things that they learned, but not what they actually do.
Yeah.
What's interesting for me about these facts is that now that I have Star Wars friends to talk to, everyone has heard all of this somewhere.
I've never heard of these, by the way. Sorry.
Well, you're...
I'm a Star Wars fan, but I'm not a super fan.
It's funny when, like, you find out that other people know these things, too. Because I look back and I'm like, how did I know that? Like, I heard it, I read it in a magazine one day, I heard it in an interview one day, and then they like put it all together in the extra features DVD.
There was a time, and maybe we'll touch on this later, but there was a time when there was only 6 hours of Star Wars.
Yeah.
And that time was 1983
It was kind of
until 1999. And there was something wonderful about that, in that you loved it so much.
There's a Christmas special though.
Although back then it was hard to find.
That's true.
Because there was
I've
no
never seen
enter. Yeah, skip it. But there was something so special about that, because you needed to pull every Star Wars fact there was. Like, if there was a magazine if TV Guide mentioned Star Wars on page 80,
Yes.
you would buy TV Guide because it said Star Wars in it, and somebody was recognizing that Star Wars existed once upon a time, because nobody cared anymore about it. You couldn't buy a Star Wars t-shirt anywhere. Even comic book stores didn't have Star Wars t-shirts back then, that you couldn't buy Star Wars merchandise. There was a point in time. Imagine this. There was a point in
I
time
don't have to imagine.
that I owned every single piece of licensed Star Wars merchandise that had been released for a 10-year period. Can you imagine saying that now?
No.
Like, I'd need an Amazon warehouse, and it still wouldn't house all of it.
By the way, I'm just gonna say you guys are crazy to me. By the way, I'm just kidding. You guys are crazy super fans.
We're used to it.
I should show you my home studio. I have a 600 square foot Star Wars museum.
Wow.
Well, I want to see it.
So,
Next time I drop off a piece
Oh,
of
yeah, I'll take you out
something.
there.
Yeah, I mean, two of my, I would say, like, by myself growth moment. I don't even know what you would call them, but I distinctly remember, like, when we first got the internet, and I would go to the force.net and just scan it for everything. And then I would take, I think it was the TV Guide or whatever they would call it, and I would look through it every day to see if there was an interview for George Lucas, for Harrison Ford, for Steven Spielberg, and I would record it on my little VHS tape so that I could have it. But now, all of that is on the extra bonus footage for your Blu-ray or Disney Plus.
Wow. Okay. You guys are.
We're into it.
Yeah, you guys are. I mean,
Okay,
I thought I was.
think
a
I
fan.
got the next one.
Okay.
Star Wars was the first major science fiction blockbuster, and it launched in the science fiction boom that still reigns supreme at the box office.
Is that true? Really?
So the first blockbuster that they teach you in film school is Jaws. But Star Wars was the
Summer.
thing that made summer movies a thing. The thing that's interesting about that is you call Star Wars a science fiction movie.
It's it's science
And
fantasy.
it's science fantasy.
Science fantasy.
Everybody,
Okay, I'm
What's the
starting over.
difference?
everybody,
Yeah, let's just skip it.
No, no.
well, like everybody calls Star Wars
Science
science
fiction,
fiction.
fantasy.
I mean, I don't even think you're wrong in your fact. I just think it's interesting that everybody
But that's
saw
what George Lucas calls it. A
Space.
science fiction fantasy.
everybody saw space and they're like, this is sci-fi. But there's nothing science about Star Wars. It's religion and mythology, and it's more like Kurosawa than it is like if you look at 2001 or you look at Star Trek. Like if you take the science out of Star Trek or the science out of 2001, the technology of Star Wars, if you remove the technology from Star Wars and set it in the Old West, it's the same movie. If
Yeah.
you take the science out of Star Trek,
Like Mando.
nothing's there anymore.
Yeah.
If you take the science out of the technology out of 2001, it doesn't exist anymore. Ray Bradbury is science fiction.
Yes.
Star Wars is
Interesting.
fantasy.
August 6th, 2023, Star Wars is said to have made at least $32 billion in merchandising, and Star Wars still holds the Guinness World Record for the most successful film merchandising franchise in history.
Prior to its release, summer was considered a dry season for movies.
But the immense success of Star Wars demonstrated the commercial potential of big-budget, effects-driven films. Studios began to prioritize summer releases leading to the birth of the modern blockbuster era. That's interesting because, I mean, summer is not nearly as important as it used to be, I think.
That's
now
true.
with streaming. I mean,
Yeah.
I remember as a kid, it was like, you'd have to wait in line for Independence Day or whatever, but now it's not as big of a thing. I just walk into theaters, there's no lines anymore.
I have a theory that we're kind of back into a Ben-Hur era where for a little while, like the biggest things like Dune That's what people are going to go see. We'll probably trickle back to normal eventually. So observing the post-pandemic theater life that we have, I mean, so many things don't do well and then they're like, take them out of the theater after 2 weeks because they aren't doing well.
No, they're taken out of theaters because they're limited releases. They're always meant to be like 1 or 2 weeks. It's mostly for like awards and stuff because you can't.
Oh, so they can be considered.
Yeah, you can't be considered an award unless you're in a theatrical for like a weekend, basically. And then if it does really, really well, they'll keep going, but it's probably not going to do really well, and then it's just gonna
let it go
and then go to streaming. Yeah, that's how it works nowadays. Yeah, Star Wars revolutionized the field of special effects through its groundbreaking use of models, miniatures, and CGI. Industrial Light and Magic, ILM, the visual effects company founded by George Lucas, pushed the boundaries of what was possible in filmmaking.
Another little nerdy fun fact about me is I wrote, because people used to do these sort of things, but I wrote Industrial Light and Magic, letting them know that I wanted to work for them when I was in 6th grade. And they wrote me back and they all signed it. We're like, we're looking forward to seeing you in the future. And it had like a little pamphlet about all their education programs.
Oh, wow.
I still have it.
Well, why didn't you work for them?
Well, let me know when they're ready to hire me because I've certainly applied.
Oh, you've applied?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
What do you guys think I do all day? Let's do this. But before we share our what if scenarios, I have some rules.
Rules?
Yes, rules. People have spent years now, even decades, discussing what they wish could be different about the prequel and sequel trilogies. So for the sake of my physical and mental health, I ask that all participants try to remember the mission we have been assigned if they choose to accept it.
Which is?
To discuss what we think the world would be like if we were not blessed in 1977 with one of the greatest films of all time, Star Wars.
All right, I go first. If
If
the world didn't have Star Wars in 1977, I think the movie industry would have changed. I think that it's kind of like what's going on now in the film industry. Right now in the film industry, there's very few films that are being made for over 10 million, and the majority of them are like in that 3 to 7 million world, because those are the films that are viable for a streaming platform. And the idea of like these big theaters is like not a reality. For example, I saw Civil War yesterday, and I went to a Lemley's, and it was like a 30-seat theater. And I was like, this used to be a 200-seat theater I'm sitting in. And they just broke it into smaller groups. And I think that one of the things Star Wars did is for the 1980s and 1990s, it was a boom for the movie or for the theatrical theater companies. And I think that maybe if Star Wars never existed, we would have just went straight to the kind of where we are now. That's just my thought, though. I don't know. And I think storytelling would have been very different.
I think that it's a little bit of an overwhelming task because there's so many things that we could touch on. You can touch on that, like box office, budgets, and things like that. For me, I think about like society. And I was thinking earlier while JC was talking about the first time I saw Star Wars as a first grader, little girl. And what's interesting to me is like my whole life, I thought I was one of 2 people that liked Star Wars and a bunch of other guys that I occasionally saw at like a convention or something that were 20 years older than me. And more recently, and I love it, when Star Wars has become everything. And it turns out everybody loves Star Wars. And I'm like, this is so interesting, because I was wondering, like, would I still have wanted to be a filmmaker if there wasn't for Star Wars? Maybe Indiana Jones and Jurassic Park combined, but those are still like years later from when I saw Star Wars. And I think that something that makes Star Wars, people aren't going to like this word, but I'm going to say unique. And I think there probably are other franchises like this, like X-Men, that Star Wars is for everybody. Like, that's the best thing I can say, is that so many people like Star Wars because it is for everybody. And so that makes me think a little bit further back. What if all we had, I'm speaking for my favorite movies, like what if we just had Indiana Jones and we just had Jurassic Park, and I like a lot of other things too, but I don't know. I mean, even with X-Men, I'm seeing it with, you know, you're showing the cartoons with the voice
X-Men
actors.
97. Yeah, every week we do a screening of X-Men 97 with one of the voice actors from the show comes in and watches it with us.
Yeah, and I feel like obviously who knows what scale it's on because you can only fit so many people into the bar. But like, I'm like, I didn't know this many people really liked X-Men. And so I don't even know what the answer to that is. But without Star Wars, I hope that there's something else that everyone would feel like so touched by that story and inspired by that story. For some of us, I'll speak for myself, we find certain franchises and they're just there for us when we need them. And that can be another reason why people like Star Wars so much.
You make me feel like I'm not a fan of any movies because you're much more of a fan than I've ever been.
Part of the reason why I love like a lot of the characters I like and a lot of the movies I like and a lot of the stories I like is because through fictionalized characters, I'm able to process things and learn more of who I am.
No, but you're just...
And I learned that from your class.
I'm just saying you're just a bigger fan than I am ever of any movie. And I'm jealous of you. But JC, go ahead.
Oh, okay.
If Star Wars was never made, and we touched on this earlier, and we touched on what film school teaches you, but the world needed a Star Wars. So if Star Wars had never been made, would it have been Christopher Reeve's Superman that popped? Or would it have been E.T. that popped? I mean, E.T. did pop.
Yeah.
But would those things have popped more? Or would they have never been made because Star Wars proved that they could have? But the world needed Star Wars. And when the world needs something, I think it finds a way to, like, somebody would find a way to do a thing. Maybe it's not a space movie with a dog that flies a giant cheeseburger. But I think something would have come along to try to fill that space. Taking a more cynical look on it, everybody looked at what Star Wars was, and then all of a sudden, Joseph Campbell was a household name. And Hero with a Thousand Faces is the book that's on every bookshelf of every Hollywood executive. And they're reading a script trying to match page numbers to one of the 12 plot points of Hero's journey.
Yeah.
And I think in a way, if you could look at Star Wars and take that lesson away, like, oh, this is screenplays just need to be cut and paste, and if we just cut and paste in this way, everything's going to be. We're gonna make $1 billion franchise and sell lots of action figures. But
Hero's
I think
journey over and over and over again.
Yeah, but I think there's something to that, right? Like Star Wars speaks a universal language. If you actually read Hero with a Thousand Faces, which I've tried to, and it's dense and complicated and not fun. It's not like a cut and paste thing. It's what is the human language, right? And Star Wars found a way to look at Hero with a Thousand Faces and speak the human language, meaning it didn't matter if you were in Brazil and spoke Portuguese, or you were in San Francisco, or you were in Russia or China or Germany. Like, you saw what was happening and you understood it, right? It was like something about who you are as a human being and the way our brains are hard coded that touched on. And I think that's why it was so big. And I think that's what the world needed at that time. But a lot of people took the wrong message from it.
When you say what the world needed, can you expand on that a little bit?
It's just a dark time, right? Like Vietnam War, moving towards like 80s recession, we were coming out of a long period of hard times for people, and Star Wars was kind of that like pop of the champagne cork, and we're moving into the 80s where everybody's doing cocaine and overspending and cashing in on the wealth of the greatest generation.
I feel like I can see that now that you mention it, like as we are wherever we are with the pandemic, but there are a lot of shows and movies that I wonder if they would have been as popular or done as well as they did. It seemed like that's what everyone needed right then. Like Ted Lasso. That's what everyone needed right then. Or there's a bunch. Everyone's going to be different. Ted Lasso is
a great example of that, where it's so, and everything you're watching is like Last of Us. And you're like, this is bleak. Like everything was so bleak. And then Ted Lasso drops. And you're just like, oh my God, this isn't the hero we asked for, but it's definitely the hero we need right now, right? The other thing that I think is interesting about Star Wars and if it never existed is Star Wars and I could be wrong, but my theory is Star Wars is the first movie that people, and to this day, one of the only movies that your experience with Star Wars actually begins when you leave the movie theater after the credits roll. Meaning, I love Dune, right? I fell in love with Dune. I knew nothing about Dune. I watched Dune, and I was like, I turned it right back on. I immediately rewatched it. But when the credits were done, I was like, okay, I'm going to go about my day. But when people watch Star Wars for the first time, the movie doesn't end and they're like, well, let's go get ice cream. The movie ends and they're like, I want to play with my toys, or I want to make robots for a living, or I want to be I want to go do martial arts, or I want to work for NASA, or I want to do this stuff. And I say that because I actually started work on a documentary 15 years ago called There Is No Try. Because I had come from baseball, I had talked to so many athletes, like one I'll throw out there, CJ Wilson, who is a pitcher for the Texas Rangers and the Angels. And he went to Loyola Marymount over here in over by LAX. He was undersized. They told him, you're not going to play pro baseball. He had Tommy John surgery out to start his career.
Before everyone had it.
Before everyone was getting Tommy John surgery. Yeah. And everybody's like, you're not going to do it. 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 He got to the major leagues. He was a relief pitcher. He wanted to be a starter. Everybody's like, you're never going to be a starter in the major leagues. And so I had an opportunity. I spent a bunch of time with him, did a bunch of interviews with him. And we asked him, we were like, how did you overcome everybody doubting you? He goes, that was the easiest thing. He's like, I just watch Star Wars every day.
Wow.
Another fact I'll drop for people in Los Angeles. Kobe Bryant, one of the best basketball players of all time. Do you guys know what his nickname was in junior high?
No.
Kobe One Kenobi.
Nice.
Now, if you know sports, and I know a lot of like nerd people don't know sports, but I'm like that bi guy who knows sports. And the other, Kobe Bryant had the horrible injury, I think, to his ankle, right? And he missed like almost a season and a half or whatever.
Yeah.
When he came back, his first game, when they announced him, do you know what music they played?
The March.
The Imperial March.
Oh.
Because he was a Star Wars kid.
That's funny.
He found drive in part through the hero's journey that he witnessed in Star Wars. And it goes on and on. Like
that would have been a great documentary.
Yeah. Head of robotics at MIT, like NASA scientists. There's so many people and then the obvious ones, which is like filmmakers and artists and stuff. But even beyond artistic endeavors, there are so many people from every discipline that saw Star Wars and it lit a fire in them that was different than the fire it like lit in filmmakers. Like they saw themselves in that way, in that movie, in a way that other people didn't, and they are at the top of their fields in all these different disciplines. So if Star Wars never existed, CJ Wilson isn't a baseball player, and Kobe Bryant is never one of the best basketball players to ever live, and the head of robotics at MIT is not doing what she's doing, and it trickles across
That's incredible.
Everywhere.
Wow.
In every discipline of the people who are the best in the world.
That's crazy.
That's awesome. I think I'm still learning why I like Star Wars, and that's fine because that itself is a journey, and I love meeting other people and having these kinds of conversations and learning more about myself and others in the world.
And I can see it too because I know my son, when he first started watching it, that was the first thing that he got obsessed about, right? The first kind of franchise of
Star Wars?
Yeah, Star Wars.
Oh,
so he watches one, and then and then for the next 2 years, we just watch everything, get Star Wars toys, and go to the Disneyland and go to the Star Wars area. I mean, that's like he was into other things, but it was never an obsession. He even called himself before a Star Wars nerd, and I was like, oh, that's interesting because that's the first time he's ever felt that way about a franchise or anything. So right when you started talking about it, I started thinking, oh yeah, I guess that's true. I mean, and you're right. When I was a kid, it was you were 6 hours, so I did watch it a million times, and it was my favorite movie at the time. I just didn't know about it as much as you guys, though.
Well, it's like, for me, and this is a little off subject, but the way that I made my first best friend was I wasn't a cool kid. I didn't have any friends in kindergarten, first grade, second grade. you know. And then in third grade, I like went over to this kid's house named Trevor, and we were like, I don't know, trying to learn how to be friends because he was like nerdy or whatever, and we didn't really know how to be friends. And we were like, maybe we'll play like a Nintendo game, right? And we went into his little tiny, like what was really a closet that they turned into like a game room. And we're playing Nintendo, and the toy bench we were sitting in, we opened up, and it was all of his. I was born in 81. His older brother was 75. So his older brother was older, and we opened it up, and it was like all of the. I grew up super poor, so I didn't have like the Millennium Falcon and some of this stuff. It was like the Millennium Falcon, and there was a Y-wing, and there was this. All these vehicles that I'd seen in the Sears catalog that I couldn't believe existed. And I was 9 at the time. And in the 80s, 1990, when you were 9, you were supposed to be like cool. You know what I mean? Like you weren't like playing with toys anymore, you loser. So there was like a conversation. It's like, oh, Star Wars. Do you care if I like take that out? I never had that when I was a kid. At 9, I said I never had that when I was a kid. And we took it out, and we like both kind of like did that awkward dance around the fact that like, if I say I want to play with this toy, are you going to make fun of me? And then at school, I'm going to be even more of a pariah. And so we like did that dance around a little bit. And then like he and I played Star Wars toys, like had sleepovers every weekend. It was like the way I made my first friend. And what I have learned from Star Wars, and what you said, you're like, oh, I'm still learning why I love Star Wars. Like for me, it is a thing that has taught me that if you follow your passion, the thing that you really love, that it's like the best North Star you can follow. And I always loved Star Wars unabashedly. And even if I kept it hidden from the bigger world for a long time because I didn't want to get beat up, within my safe group, I just gushed it and I let it all out. And I was like, not afraid to be me. And I mean, that's led to a career of like
all the things
doing everything that I've ever wanted to do. You know, like when I was a kid, my first dream was to be an 80s rock star on Sunset Strip. And then my second dream was to be a professional baseball player. And my most realistic dream, I guess, was to be like known around the world as Mr. Star Wars and meet George Lucas and go to Skywalker Ranch. I went to London to the Star Wars convention. I got stopped for pictures and autographs and chats every single day.
Wow.
And I met George Lucas, and I've been to Skywalker Ranch 15 times. I mean, during the pandemic, I went up there, and it was me and my family and 2 friends, and we like hung out at the ranch for an afternoon in the middle of the pandemic with nobody else there. And so like I have pictures of my daughter at 9 months old sitting on the steps to the main house at Skywalker Ranch with not a soul in sight. And it's like so special to me to have like my kid sitting there before her first birthday. And it was like my 9-year-old dream. I was like, if I can just get to Skywalker Ranch and tell George Lucas how much this movie means to me. And I got to do that. I mean, you have kids, right? Like there's something about seeing your kids achieve the things that you wanted so bad and work so hard at with less effort than you did. Like you paved a path to make it a little bit easier for them. It's just so cool, you know, and it's Star Wars has provided me a way to chase my dreams without fear.
You'll be happy to know my son's 12-year-old friends, they still play with Lego clones.
Yeah.
So that's I don't think that there's as much of a stereotype. Yeah, because when I was a kid, if I was playing with Legos at 12, I probably got my ass kicked.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
But now these 12-year-olds, I don't care. And they're playing. They come over and they bring all their clones.
Oh, it's so
and they
cool.
just play with each other. And a part of me is always like, are you guys going to get beat up? Although, side story, I coached a baseball team. And one of the kids is like, do people that play Dungeons and Dragons not have girlfriends? I was like, I don't think that's the way it is anymore. But when I was a kid, that was a thing. But now there's enough girls that play Dungeons and Dragons and they're cool. And I don't think it's as much of an issue. But back then, yeah, for sure.
Dude,
100%.
Here's the thing about Dungeons and Dragons when we were growing up. In the social, like the high school, like football team, then the high school baseball team, and then like the AV geeks, and then the Star Wars geeks. And the only people below the Star Wars geeks were the Dungeons and Dragons nerds. Like even the Star Wars nerds would beat up on the Dungeons and Dragons nerds. That's how lowly they are. Now it's the exact opposite. Now every single writer's room in Hollywood, I feel like, is full of people who played Dungeons and Dragons growing up.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's 100%. Okay, then, so which story do we think is the most plausible, and which story do we think actually would happen, or what do you guys think? I'm voting for yours, JC. I
think you nailed
I mean,
it.
I don't even know if I answered the question correctly.
Yeah, you were able to summarize. I've been sitting over here. I expected to be just like talking so much, as I always do, about Star Wars and the things I love. Like you could just see it just go like, wow, like turn into electricity. And I haven't been that way. It's because I'm feeling like a sense of reverence about what it is that we're talking about. And you gave it that. You gave it the importance that it truly is, and how it truly has affected all of us and our society, and what a loss it would be without it.
And you had me at Kobe Bryant, too. So
Exactly.
I'm a Lakers fan. I'm a huge Lakers fan.
No,
Yeah.
really?
Yeah.
No,
Season
I would have never
tickets.
guessed. Never. Not once have you ever mentioned them.
Dodger fan, Randy Wolf.
Yeah.
Huge Star Wars nerd. He had a life-size stormtrooper in the entrance way to his house. Joey Fatone of NSYNC, massive Star Wars nerd. You want to hear something wild? Joey Fatone, NSYNC 3 or 4 weeks ago did a reunion concert where all of them were together for the first time in 20 years or whatever it was, right? More than 20 years. And then Justin Timberlake went home to Jessica Biel. Everybody went their own ways. Do you know what Joey Fatone did? He came to Scum and Villainy Cantina and hung out on a Wednesday night after the NSYNC reunion show.
Oh, wow.
How wild is that? Joey Fatone is such a nerd
awesome.
that he's like, you know what I'm going to do after having this giant trending moment across all social media where people would have died to come see me dance on stage with those guys again? I'm going to go down the road to Scum and Villainy.
He was always my favorite, and I didn't even know that.
So it is. It's everywhere.
So if you had to live the rest of your life dressed as one Star Wars character, who would it be and why?
Chewbacca. He doesn't wear any clothes.
But you'd be Harry. Is that okay?
Yeah, I don't want to be Harry.
Honestly, it would be like some sort of Jedi outfit. Because it's so comfortable.
Like the robes?
It's so cool.
They're basically kimonos. Can we address the fact that it's everything's like super
Yes.
Japanese?
Oh, absolutely.
In your Star Wars facts, the original actor they wanted to play Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Oh, no, I
What's his
didn't know.
name? The Mifune.
Mifune.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
A lot of the stuff now is so close to being Japanese. You're just like, And I don't think it was that way as much before, or maybe I just didn't. There's so few shows. There's only 3 movies, so I guess I couldn't really feel it. But now a lot of times you're like, dude, this is like, you're just like ripping off Japanese stuff here at this point.
Yes, there is a difference between being inspired by and ripping off.
Yeah, a lot of the art and then the lettering and the clothing and the looks. I'm just like, But I did kendo, Japanese sword fighting, because I thought it was be like Luke. And then after 2 years, I was like, what the fuck? Why am I still doing this? But I had to keep doing.
That's funny. I took Aikido for 2 years because I was like, Aikido is like the martial art that with the spiritual martial art that people would talk about Aikido is very close to being like a Jedi mindset. So I did that for 2 years and then I was like, what am I doing?
Yeah, I ended up doing kendo for 20 years, but it was we make I do jujitsu. I own a jujitsu studio. We make fun of Aikido people though, unfortunately, because there's always fights between online. There's fights between Aikido and others, because Aikido people are very we're gonna beat everybody up, and then it's just not as relevant sometimes as some of these other.
Wait, but what about you? What are you going to wear? You, Mr. Borderline, 1 foot out the door Star Wars fan.
Well, one of the things I will say is that you guys have you put me in awe that I just don't love Star Wars as much. I love Star Wars, but I'm so impressed about how much you guys love it. It just makes
All
me
levels of Star Wars fandom are accepted and appreciated.
I mean, I'm a fan. I know the lore, and I've read books, and I think I pretty much watched every show, mostly because my son watches it. So then I sit there and
What's your
watch it.
favorite?
My favorite show?
Favorite Star Wars movie or show?
What's the one between 3 and 4? The one-off one.
Rogue One.
Rogue One. That's my favorite.
that
one.
was very good.
And then
Great.
The other one that I think I tell people all the time, and people who aren't Star Wars fans and they don't believe me, it's the Clone Wars TV show is awesome.
Oh, it's
Clone
so good.
Wars TV
Yeah.
show is awesome.
But people are always like, "Oh, it's a lame cartoon." I'm like, "No, this is one of the best shows around.
Can I tell you my favorite episode of the Clone Wars?
Yes,
my favorite
please.
scene in season 7, which was like after the show had been canceled by Kathleen Kennedy, and then the fans like uproared, and they came back and they did like one more season. In season 7, there's an episode where, because you have to think like Clone Wars came out in 2008 and it finished in 2015, 16. So if you were 8 or 9 years old when you started watching the Clone Wars, that show matured with you.
Yeah.
Right. So like the stories they were telling in season 1 were stories for 8-year-olds. The stories they were telling in episode 7 or in season 7, were geared towards 14, 15-year-olds. So when you're 14, 15, you're like starting to like try to date and figure stuff out, but your hormones are crazy, your emotions are everywhere. So in season 7, there's an episode where Padme has to go on a diplomatic mission with her ex-boyfriend to like try to bring this separatist world into the Republic, because it was strategically positioned or whatever for whatever the case is. And Anakin's like, you can't go. Like, you're my wife. You cannot go. And she's like, I have to do this for the good of the Republic. And he gets like hyper controlling, and she goes anyway. And he takes off his Jedi stuff and shows up and like barges in on them when they're having like a conversation that looks one way, but it's really going another way. And Anakin like jumps on him and is like throwing him across the room with the Force and stuff. And it's character's name's Clovis. He's like, oh, you've got to use your Jedi powers to beat me up. Like, he's like, Anakin's like, no, I don't. And he like jumps on top of him and he pulls the glove off of his robotic hand and starts punching him in the face. And Padme's screaming at him to stop. And the episode ends. She's like, I think we need to like reevaluate our relationship.
Wow.
And I'm like, the fuck did I just watch? This is a cartoon. But for me, to prove your point, like that is what we need to see from the guy who's about to become Darth Vader.
Yeah.
That's that's the story point that we didn't see in episodes 1, 2, or 3, that you fill that in that cartoon, and you're like, oh, I understand why that jealous monster becomes this jealous monster.
Yeah.
You know, if he's willing to do that because he's holding on so tight to this woman, I mean, like, of course he would blow up an entire planet to hold on to the anger that she's gone. And, oh, God.
I've said it once. I'll say it 1,000 times. I'm making T-shirts. Dave Filoni for president. John Favreau for vice president. I'll have a petition for you to sign.
I'll dress up as the old Obi-Wan.
Nice.
Oh, are we still talking about?
Sorry.
I guess we didn't answer the
question.
dress-up question. I've done a lot of Star Wars cosplay. I've done Biker Scout. I've done Han Solo. I've done like a lot of like my kind of own characters. I think it depends. 43-year-old me is like, I just want to be comfortable. And those boots are terrible. The Han Solo boots are so uncomfortable. But in September, I went on the Disney Galactic Star Cruiser, what people dubbed the Star Wars Hotel, but it was so much not that.
Is it expensive?
It's,
Okay.
Do we want to go into the?
No.
I just
Okay,
wanna
I'm gonna
hear
have to
about your
sell. I'm gonna have to
experience.
sell. I'm gonna have to sell the Star Cruiser that nobody can go on. I can change your mind in 3 minutes on the Star Cruiser.
Tell me.
Especially because you're a sports guy. I think what I would love to wear is a smuggler outfit though, with more comfortable boots, because you just feel freaking cool when you're wearing that stuff. Okay, Star Cruiser. Isn't it really expensive?
Yeah.
Have you ever been to a World Series baseball game?
Yeah.
How much was your ticket?
I don't remember. It wasn't super expensive. It wasn't as expensive as buying it online or something.
Okay. Are you a football fan at all?
I was going to buy the Super Bowl tickets.
For the Rams?
Yeah, because it was here.
Okay, so Super Bowl ticket is $8,000.
Yeah. I was hesitating on 4,000 a piece.
Okay, so even say that. Super Bowl ticket is $4,000
Yeah.
to sit in the worst seats in the house. How long is a Super Bowl game? 4 hours, right?
Yeah.
Because it's got an extended halftime. So you're spending $1,000 an hour to go to the Super Bowl because you love the Rams.
Yeah. I
Okay.
don't love the Rams, but okay. Yeah. Just to see the Super Bowl. Yeah.
Just to see the Super Bowl, and it's in LA, and it's
Yeah.
the home team playing, whatever.
100%.
$1,000 an hour. Do you drink beer?
Yeah.
How much is a beer at a Super Bowl?
Like $20.
$20. So then you buy maybe 3 beers. You're at $1,020 an hour. Then you got to buy some food, and then you do the thing. So you're spending, and you're lucky you live in LA. Most fans will travel, so then there's a hotel and an airfare, right? So you're spending on a Super Bowl ticket, a cheap Super Bowl ticket, between $1,000 and $2,000 per hour of entertainment. Disney Star Cruiser is not $5,000 per person. It's $5,000 per room. Rooms have 5 beds in them. So if you're smart, it's $1,000 per night. Or $1,000 for each person to go, right? If you have 5 friends. So at $1,000, the experience is 45 hours long. And all food is included. The only thing you have to pay for is alcohol. So $1,000 divided by 45 hours comes out to be what, like $40 an hour, something like that. Why is it that the Super Bowl is not too expensive?
I feel like we're in high school again.
But the Star Wars thing is, it's so expensive. So the Star Wars experience is the best escape room, the best dinner theater, the best live action role play, and the best team building experience that has ever been built. You make movies.
Yeah.
When you're making your movies, your goal as the writer, director, person is, when I'm sitting in the theater, you want me to either laugh at this moment or cry at this moment. And the reason that you're doing that is you're going inside of yourself and you're picking something that makes you emotional, and you're trying to manipulate it in a way that it's going to make everybody else respond to it the same way you are. Now, Galactic Star Cruiser, what if, when you're watching a movie, you are the person who's trying to trick us into having feelings? At the Galactic Star Cruiser, every choice I made played into the story we were telling. For 45 hours, if I decided to walk down the staircase instead of taking the elevator, that could impact what happens. So my experience on it, and this is just one of many, is the choices you make set you down a path. You're either going to be a bad guy, you're going to be a good guy, you're going to be a smuggler, you're going to be a Jedi, or you're going to fall somewhere in between. And I was making a lot of choices to be a smuggler, not on purpose, but the choices I was making was pushing me down a smuggler, kind of like smuggler, half Jedi. But like, there was a moment in time when I was like, not all my friends that I went with were off on their own missions. And I just wanted to go and sit in the lobby and like take a break, because I was going and going and going and I hadn't slept and I just needed to take a breather. So I'm sitting in the lobby, and the other story is like the lovable loser. It's like, I'm going to call him like either the like C-3PO character or the Jar Jar Binks character. He's like the new ship's mechanic that just got hired, and he's too young and he's a little stupid, and this whole thing, right? And so that's another storyline. Well, I was on the second to last trip. Nobody wanted to venture off with the lovable loser guy. Everybody wanted to be a smuggler, because smugglers are cool. We like Han Solo. Fuck Luke Skywalker and Jar Jar Binks, right? So like, I'm sitting in the lobby and the actor comes up to me and he's like, "Hey man, what are you doing?" I'm just sitting here soaking it in. He goes, "You want to go steal a ship?" I was like, "Yes, I do." So there were 6 of us, and we hacked into the bridge of the fake spaceship we were on. And when you get onboarded into the spaceship, they teach you how to like shoot at TIE fighters and run the shields and steer the ship and do all the stuff. Well, usually there's like, it's a giant room. It's probably 4 times the room we're standing in, and there's all these computer terminals. So it usually takes 30 people to run the ship. And they teach you that multiple times through multiple excursions. There's 6 of us. And this guy, Sammy, is standing on the chair and he's like, "Fire, do this, do this, do this." And we like captured this TIE fighter. We stole this ship. We like downloaded the plans. And later that evening, during the big climax of the story, there's 300 people in the lobby of this spaceship, and all of the actors are acting. And Sammy, who's like accidentally got Chewbacca taken away and thrown in jail, and accidentally gave the droid that had the plans that were going to save the resistance and all this stuff. The First Order is about to win. They're taking the ship into the Kylo Ren shows up. They're taking it in. And this lovable loser, Sammy, shows up, comes out in a stormtrooper costume, like frees Chewbacca, pulls off his helmet, and he's like, jumps up on the couch in the middle of the lobby and gives this big speech. And typically the big speech is, "I'm just the lovable loser on this ship. But my crew of 30 people stuck with me for the whole time. And we stole this ship and we did this and we did this. And I know I've made mistakes, but it's never too late to turn around your fortunes, right? This big rah-rah moment. But when I was there was only 6 of us. And none of us were the ones who were supposed to be there. We just happened to be in the right place at the right time to go down this path. So he jumps up on the thing and his rah-rah speech isn't like, and these 30 people stuck with me for this whole trip. It's, I had a crew of people commit to me and you all bailed except for that guy and that guy and that girl and that alien over there. And we proved that 6 people can make a difference in this galaxy. And that guy blew up a TIE fighter and that guy saved your lives and you don't even know it. And now I'm in a room with 300 people looking at me in the big climax of this whole thing that we've all lived. And he's pointing at me. And the hero isn't something that somebody wrote. The hero is me because I made a choice, even incidentally. And the emotion that brings up in you, being an active participant in the story that's happening and having those people, the theater around you, was so surreal versus the passively consuming a movie that it changed my life. Like I got home, and I'm probably going to get canceled for saying this publicly, but like you have one kid, two kids, one kid. So like for me, like I'm playing with my 2 and 3-year-old, and she's awesome. She has a really active imagination, but like she wants to play house. You like play house for 5 minutes because you want to be a good dad. And then at 5 minutes, you check your phone and you're like, I want to be a good dad. I'm going to play at least another 5 minutes. And at 5 more minutes, you're like, okay, honey. And she's like, Dada, I really want to play with you. And you're like, I can't say no to my kid. I'm going to play another 5 minutes, right? Because we're all adults and it's hard to be that free and make believe. And there's work and we've got to make money and we got to do this and we got to pay bills and we got to think about what we're going to have for dinner. So like, you know, my tolerance for playing with my daughter was about 15 minutes before I was like, honey, I got to go to the bathroom. Like pulling the eject cord, right? Coming back from Star Cruiser, my daughter loves Spider-Man. I bought a Spider-Man costume and I bought her a Spider-Gwen costume. And we play Spider-Man for like hours in a row because getting to make believe with 300 other people, not for 3 hours at escape room or 2 hours at Renaissance Fair, but for like 2 full days. Every minute of every day, you are encapsulated within this world where you're not a loser for playing Dungeons and Dragons. You're the better you play Dungeons and Dragons, the higher you climb in this world. Like I came back and like we build forts and like I play with her for hours. So like the legacy of that place was it was able to like when adolescence creeps in and like you build that tough skin and that body armor around your whole body and like you become so afraid to show who you really are to the world. The genius of that Star Cruiser experience is it doesn't pull that all off, but it like puts enough cracks in the scales of the dragon that like when you see that opportunity of like a little kid wants to play with you or like there's a balloon in the room and like a balloon for a kid is the coolest thing. But like for you, you're like, oh my God, I'm going to have to throw that out. And then my kid's going to be pissed off. Like the balloon is cool. Like it opens you up to that like childhood part of your brain in a way that like no movie I've ever made, no movie I've ever seen, like no, even Star Wars didn't do for me what living that experience was. And like the Star Wars is incidental. The Star Wars doesn't even matter. Like the only thing you see is like Chewbacca and a couple stormtroopers. Like most of it's like made up characters in a made up environment. It's not like you're in the Millennium Falcon ever, you know. It's so fantastic. And for the price, like it was worth 10 times that. It was worth 10 times that. Like I came back, I haven't written anything in 10 years. And I came back from that and I've like written 3 short films.
Wow.
You know what I mean? Like it just opened my brain up in ways that were completely closed off.
Interesting.
Anyway, sorry.
No,
I can't like anytime anybody says anything about the Star Cruiser,
I wanted
I'm
to
like
hear your experience.
I am like, Oh my
You
God,
made
you
me
have
cry.
no idea. I cry thinking about, and then here's the other thing is we talked about when we were growing up, like the dark times, right? And like once upon a time, like if I was walking through the mall and I saw a guy in a Star Wars shirt, because let's be honest, women didn't ever wear Star Wars shirts because women hated Star Wars in the 80s, right? Supposedly, like they were more well hidden than we were. And to anybody listening, I'm obviously being sarcastic. Please don't cancel me. But it's like you saw somebody in a Star Wars shirt and you're like, you're my best friend. Like, we both love Star Wars. You're willing to wear a Star Wars shirt in public. You're not only my best friend, you're my hero. And then the special editions and the prequel trilogy and then the Disney sale. And now you see somebody in a Star Wars shirt and you're like, Han Solo, right? And they're like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, Star Wars? And they're like, oh, like I just shop at Target. You know what I mean? Like it doesn't have, it's diluted, right? It's everywhere. But when I see somebody who's been on Star Cruiser, because they give you this special
you
pin,
get
Star Cruiser has the highest customer satisfaction of any Disney thing in history.
Really?
When I see somebody who's been on the Star Cruiser and they have their pin on and I go, when'd you go? And they're like, oh, like I was like the fourth to last trip. I was the second to last trip. And there is an instantaneous, like almost tangible bond, even if you don't know the person at all. Like you feel almost like you're part of this weird family. And again, like a Super Bowl sells 70, 80,000 tickets. I think 72,000 people went on the Galactic Star Cruiser. So in the same way of like, I saw Carlton Fisk hit the home run, right? Like that made it into the script for Good Will Hunting, right? That was the big moment. Like Robin Williams gave up the ticket to see Carlton Fisk hit the home run to go chase his girl. And that's the big moment of that story, right? When you see that moment, like I was in San Francisco when Barry Bonds broke Hank Aaron's home run record. And like people are like, you were there? I was like, well, I was paid to follow Barry Bonds while he was chasing the home run record. So it wasn't quite the same, but like being in that spot, you know, it's like you saw Muhammad Ali fight, like being in one of those iconic spaces anywhere else. It's like that with Star Cruiser where I'm like, we are the few who got to experience the best thing that Disney's ever done before Bob Iger slashed it so that something looks good on a spreadsheet.
Oh, no. Well, I heard that they are doing something with that building currently. And my only hope is that because it did so well, that maybe they'll just continue creating new stories and more people will get to attend.
What would you wear?
See, okay. When I was a kid, I would daydream all the time that I was Han Solo's best friend, but also a Jedi. So I would be Rey. I would be Rey. Okay. Like when I saw Rey, I know I'm kind of breaking my own rule here, but when I saw Rey on television for those first few seconds of, because I don't watch trailers, The Force Awakens, I was like, that's her. That's the person I pretended I was when I was a kid. You know? We don't need to get into it. Yeah. But all that being said, that is so sick. I was going to ask you about that costume.
To anybody listening at home, I'm showing them pictures of me on the Star
We'll have to put those. Yeah, can you send those to us to put on social? We're going to put all these in social. Just put a link. We'll put a link. All of them.
So I brought 5 costumes. I brought 2 dinner costumes. I brought an arrival costume, an exit costume, and my main day costume.
But in general, do you want to tell us about your super nerdy bar that's for all fandoms?
Oh, gosh. I'm going to try to keep this really short. The hardest thing, like when I left Galactic Star Cruiser, I went back to my Airbnb and wept and just cried because it was completely overwhelming. When I think about it now, my eyes tear up and it's been almost a year. Like going to a Comic-Con for the first time or whatever. I've been to, I don't know how many Star Wars celebrations. Almost every Star Wars celebration that has been in the United States, except for the first one, I've been to, including London last year. So 10 plus. And the thing that I think that like people don't understand about Star Wars, and I think the thing that like Disney has really missed above everything else, is that we all think that like the cool part about Star Wars is a lightsaber, or a blaster, or a spaceship, or a desert planet, or. None of those things are the best things about Star Wars. Best thing about Star Wars is waiting in line for 6 hours to see Mark Hamill tell a story and hanging out with the person standing in front of you and behind you. And then going to the bar at the hotel where there's 20,000 nerds staying and talking about the things that you saw and then having them tell you about the things that they saw that you missed and living vicariously through the other people at that bar at the hotel. And I did that enough times where I was like, how come nobody's made that bar that exists every day? How come nobody's made the bar for like the kids who used to hang out at the comic book shop because it was the only place for them to go and not get beat up and talk about the things they want? How come nobody's made that bar? How come nobody's made that place? And in 7 years ago, we just had our 7-year anniversary. 7 years ago, I figured out how to make that happen. So Scum and Villainy we started as a pop-up in April of 2017. We ran as a pop-up bar. We had to buy tickets for 4 months. And then for 6.5 years later, we're the nerd spot. Like Kevin Smith does his podcast from there. We're the nerd spot. And then even beyond that, in the way that I always saw Star Wars as like inspiring people to do, right? Do or do not, there is no try. Like that line that everybody quotes, like Star Wars inspires people to do. Starting it'll probably be going by the time this podcast airs, is we're doing workshops now. So we're going to do 3 days a month. And if it works, we're going to do more. We're going to do a craft foam cosplay armor tutorial class. You're going to get to come to Scum and Villainy, and we're going to give you all the materials at cost, right? So I'm buying stuff in bulk, so my cost is less. So you're going to come in, and I have an expert on making cosplay armor out of craft foam. And he's going to teach you how to make a helmet this month. And then next month, he's going to teach you how to make shoulder pads and chest armor. And then the next month, it's the leg pieces. And then it's the boot coverings. And then it's your weapon. So over the course of 6 months, you're going to get to come to Scum and Villainy, share drinks with friends. And you're going to go home after 2 hours with a helmet. If you come every month, you will walk home with a full cosplay costume for probably under $150 across 6 months. You will meet other people who are highly interested in that specific thing that you are interested in. And we're community building. Like we've built a community of like, hey, if you're nerdy in LA, come here. Now I'm like, hey, if you're nerdy in LA and you like cosplay, but you don't know how to do it, come this night. And then the next week, in May, we're doing I think it's going to be May. It's the third Tuesday in May. We haven't put tickets up yet, but we're going to do a leather class. So you're going to get to come, and Deadpool and Wolverine's coming out in June. And so we're going to teach you how to make a real leather pouch, because Deadpool's all about the pouches that your cell phone will go in.
Oh, cool.
And then May 11th, it's already sold out, but I think we're going to have tickets for May 18th. We're going to teach slush casting. So we have a guy who's coming who has all of these molds that he's made of like clone trooper helmets and masks and shoulder armor and all this stuff. And you're going to show up and you're going to pay for the materials. That one's a little bit more expensive. That's $125 because the materials are way more expensive. But you're going to show up, and he's going to teach you how to make a slush cast this month. And then the following month, it'll be like how to resin cast this thing. And then the following month, it'll be like how to make a mold. And so we have tried to evolve further from being like the nerd hangout to being like the spot where you can learn. Like you can gain a skill. You can go home with an item and meet people who are even more like you than you know, trying to find like everybody's a nerd now.
We'll put a link on the show notes too, so people could check it out as well.
I have one last thing to say.
Okay,
go for it.
Katie asked me to do this. I've done a bunch of podcasts, and I produce a podcast, and I produce Kevin Smith's podcast, and I've been working with Kevin for 13 years. If anybody doesn't know, is Jay and Silent Bob. He's Silent Bob, Clerks, Mallrats, Chasing Amy, Jay and Silent Bob. And Kevin can talk. And so for the last 13 years, I've been listening to Kevin tell stories and do podcasts and thousands of hours of Kevin Smith talking. And so I was like, okay, cool. How long is your podcast? She's like, 30 minutes, but we record for 45. I was like, I'm going to try to keep it short, but I talk a lot.
Listen,
I talk a lot.
I
was
feel
like,
we
I don't.
need to do a 4-hour long bonus episode.
I think this is going to be a two-parter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I told her, I was like, the last Star Wars podcast I did was 4.5 hours.
Oh my God.
And they released it in 5 parts.
Yeah.
Well, I think the one last thing that we need to mention, besides all the other one last things we probably need to mention, is what's happening at Scum and Villainy Cantina, say around May 4th.
Oh yeah. Again, May 4th. So, oh God, I can't say exactly what it is. So May 4th is on a Saturday this year, and it is a wild time. Picture like the best Irish bar in the world on St. Patrick's Day. Like it's that times like 10. And we are going to open at 6 a.m. And starting at 6 a.m., we are going to show a version of a movie, and I can't say the name of the movie because of our licensing agreement. But it's a version of a movie that we all love that you cannot see anymore.
Came out in the 70s or late 70s or something?
In real, like you cannot buy that version of the movie anymore. So if you want to see that again, come at 6 a.m. We'll be doing Star Wars trivia around 11 a.m. And it's like no joke Star Wars trivia. Like I write the questions, and will be the hardest, most competitive Star Wars trivia you will ever do. So if you think you know Star Wars, definitely come out on
have your weapons and vehicles
May the
person,
4th.
have your costumes person, have your characters person.
You know, one of the questions I love asking now is like when I do trivia before a Kevin Smith show, or like do like random trivia, or like we have a tie at our weekly trivia, I'll say like, name every pilot's first name that fought in the Battle of Yavin, and whoever can name the most pilots wins. Or I'll ask the question like, how many Ewoks can you name by their first names? So
None, unfortunately.
Wicket, Logray, Chief Chirpa, Nisa, if you include the cartoon, Tebow,
Now you're
Paplu,
just showing off, really.
Lektar, Nippet's the baby,
Yikes. Okay. All right. You wanna read-
Ramba.
Okay. Well, I could go on forever, but thank you so much for listening. There are almost 3 million podcasts, and we're honored you've chosen ours to listen to. Please check out our Instagram, What If Pop Podcast, for news and updates. And remember to subscribe on your preferred podcasting platform so you'll be notified about new episodes. And remember, Google Podcast has moved to YouTube Music. Be sure to tune in next month, where we'll be answering the question, what if Harry Potter was a Slytherin?
It'd probably be more fun.
What?
He'd definitely be more fun. Slytherin was the most fun. I'd want to be Slytherin personally.
I'm a Slithergriff, so
Oh,
Best
yeah.
of both
Me
worlds.
and my son both want to be Slytherin if we had to be. I was kind of a bully.
I think we can all agree that Slytherins have more fun.
Yeah, I was a bully as a kid, so
Okay. I get it. Okay,
I was-
Draco, I get it.
I was the jock kid who beat up kids. I only secretly like Star Wars. Sorry, guys.
Oh my God.
All right, guys. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.